All right. I guess we have some follow up to do here. This is a 2 year long worth of follow up. Why
2 years.
I'm likely leaving structural engineering, a thread. Marianne's going to be pleased that we're bringing this up again.
Especially since she had mentioned that, one of the things that she gained from it was notoriety on a podcast.
Yeah. And I don't think that was referenced in a positive way. I'm sure it was just kind of like, really, guys? Thanks. So here we are again. I mean, I did do a little thread on this, which got quite a bit of feedback and retweets and stuff like that about a week ago. I think I put a link to it in the last show notes, but maybe I'll put it in this one again. But so yeah, the original 2 years ago story that we're following up on now was called "Why I'm Likely Leaving," and by Engineer McClare on Twitter. And now there's been an update, a new Twitter thread by Marianne, and I told her that we were likely going to have another podcast about this because every time she does a great Twitter thread, we got to talk about it. Yeah. So you listened to the old episode, right? What number was that? Number 86, 87?
86.
Yeah. So
86.
Wow. And now we're at like 281. So it's been a while.
Wow, like almost 100 episodes ago. Wow.
Jeez.
That's insanity.
Yeah. And I think it was like November 20. Well, so no, hers
was September 27th, 2020.
2020.
Which just seems...
I mean, that's...
Since everybody knows that 2020 was a blur anyway.
Yeah. I have no recollection of this timeline at all.
Because I honestly, when I saw it, it's just like 2 years out. And I'm thinking to myself, 2 years? That's wrong. No. We didn't talk about this 2 years ago. This was something that we just talked about. Like, wasn't it like a couple weeks ago?
I do think we touch this topic quite often, actually, but not this specific. This has been a reoccurring theme for sure.
Yeah, I think, because a lot of the points that we were bringing up, especially since, she was talking about structural engineering, and we were talking about how it parallels a lot with, our experience in architecture, because we are dealing with a lot of the same kind of situations, project types, and things like that. And so when we started talking about that also led to just, this kind of like furthering of the investigation of like, why is it that the professions, and this time we're going to lump it in with architecture and engineering, aren't fostering the kind of like love relationship with people, and why people are looking to leave. And so anyway, she basically celebrated her 2-year rant anniversary.
There you go.
I absolutely love that of that tweet. But even more so is she actually did leave.
Yep. And has no regrets.
So
spoiler alert.
Exactly. I mean, because, like you think, man, I'm leaving architecture. Only to 2 years later say, man, I'm really going to leave architecture. 2 years later, then 20 years later, you're still like, man, I'll tell you what's wrong with this profession. Just like, really? So you've spent your entire career basically complaining about the career?
Yeah. Well, welcome to architecture.
Exactly. Well, 'tis true. Yeah,
a lot of complaining and not a lot of fixing, it seems like.
But the thing that I love is that she led off with the only regret that she has is not doing it sooner. And I hear this a lot, because there are a lot of people that you and I know that have gone through this, gone through architecture and decided it's not for them. I mean, basically just before the pandemic, we had an intern who basically kind of like just did this reassessment and said, is this what I really want to do? I mean, it sounded good when I'm flipping through the college, potential careers, and, like, ooh, architecture, and he was just like, it is not what I expected it to be. And so he basically went on a sabbatical. Now he's back. But I even, there was one guy I obviously won't use his name, but there was one guy at our firm who had left and went into teaching, only to turn around and come back to architecture.
It happens. Yeah, it goes both
You
ways.
know,
Yeah, sure.
but his teaching was a little different than like teaching at architecture. He like left the profession in its entirety and was a middle school math teacher.
Whoa.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And then realized, hey, I don't know which is worse. Or he
Well,
clearly,
hey, man,
he clearly learned which was.
Well, he's clearly making poor decisions all around. I mean, well,
True.
I think, leading with this idea of only wish I had done it sooner just shows how much this was a better fit. Maybe for her trajectory, maybe for her skill set. And all I can do is speculate on these things because we don't have guests on this show. But it clearly is a better fit. And to even to the point in the thread, and we'll have a link to her thread in this, and we'll have a link to our previous episode. It wasn't episode 86, it was episode 186. I was only 100 off. And we'll have a link to, in that episode, there's a link to the previous thread that she did 2 years ago. So you can find this through the magic of the internet. But the idea that she's now spending time helping other people find alternate career paths in these professions speaks volumes to kind of almost doubling down to say, no, this is better in these very explicit ways. And I don't think those things are too hard to find, right? Like there are so many things you can point at. I see people posting on social media and LinkedIn. If that's not social media, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there's all kinds of stuff talking about toxic cultures in architecture, lack of a clear path of advancement, lack of transparency in pay, especially compared to, when compared to other professions like law, right? And I don't know I don't see people talking about engineering, and things like that. But I do see people using comparisons of law, and thinking about the way that our profession, like especially with our episodes about SciArc and the base camp debacle, and now that some of those implicated in that were actually, I would just call it a forced resignation, right? Like things are kind of bubbling to the surface as far as maybe some things are maybe changing, lots of asterisks in that statement, right? But it's still like I said, it's not hard to find these things to point at to say like these things about our profession totally suck for most people, and yet here we are, like just saying, yeah, this is normal. It's like, really? And then somebody goes outside and says, wow, look what I found, and I'm going to go try to bring as many people over here as I can. Or, maybe that's not the attitude, but I'm going to help people who are interested in finding another path find it, is just saying like, there are better ways out there potentially for some people who are disenfranchised in the profession. And we talked about this kind of lack of, what was our last episode called? It was like, we're so apathetic, right? It's like
exactly
this idea that yeah, we do complain a lot and we don't do much about it. Is palpable also.
Well, okay, so she went on to celebrate her rantiversary. I don't really want to call the follow-up thread a rant.
Not at all. Yeah, it was more of just like hey,
because it was
how's it going, right?
It was exactly. But she was like, and let me just quote one of these. It's like, but I think it's important for people to know that you can care about the built environment, want to fix the culture around it, and want to advance the profession, but you don't have to martyr yourself to a traditional career path. Now, there are people who enjoy the traditional career path, and those aren't the people that she's necessarily talking to, helping shepherd define others.
Yeah,
those are
right.
people who really do care about it, but find that there is no real satisfaction in the traditional career path. But as we've always, said, there is a responsibility for those who are following a traditional career path to, if you feel like there's issues or problems with the profession, help change it, help improve it. At the very least, speak up about it. Because, I mean, when you don't know about a problem, you can't fix that problem.
Yeah.
Or if you're unwilling to, and a lot of times, there are, and I don't want to kind of get, sidetracked here, but, there are a lot of people who, through fear of losing their job or being looked down upon and said, oh, well, they're just a complainer. So, there's no real reason for us to advance them or give them promotions or salary increases or things like that because they're just not happy. I mean, maybe at some point they'll just go ahead and leave and it'll not be our problem, kind of thing. But that's the time when you do actually speak up. Those are the times when you do actually want to help push and improve the traditional path.
Yeah, I just what do you do when you do speak up and people are nodding along and yep, we absolutely should do that. This is and then nothing ever happens from, because usually those are the kinds of things that do get brought up to leadership.
Yeah.
And leadership's job is, I mean, there's a lot going on. Not going to say like these right away immediately become the most important thing for anybody, because clearly they don't, right? But these are important issues, and they are something that if true leadership is truly leading, they know how their people are feeling, they know what they're dealing with. And to talk about it from kind of an, you don't know what you don't know. Like I feel there is no excuse for leadership not to know what their people are feeling and going through.
I'm glad you brought that up because, I was going to say the exact same thing, is that if you're a leader and you're in this position and there are people in the profession, in your firm, that feel like, there's really, no way out other than to leave the profession or leave the firm, they're not leading. They're not paying attention, because if there's issues going on, you really should have the pulse of the people. And a lot of times, again, people don't like to speak up or rock the boat or things like that. But that isn't an excuse for leadership to not know if there's something going on. And why don't people want to speak up? It's just like, hey, we've checked in with a bunch of people, but we really haven't heard from Evan. Maybe we should figure out, is Evan happy? Is Evan in those kind of things? It's just kind of, pulse checks are okay, but there's more to it.
This reminds me of this one time, Cormac, when I did an all-nighter. Let's just call it an all-nighter. It probably wasn't an all-nighter. It was probably more like multiple all-nighters in a row. And I'm not happy about this, but something that quote unquote had to be done. It was like a competition style project that I was working on. And this is I know we've talked about this before, because we talked about like how the PIC like went home. It's like, let me know if you need anything. And then, was not available and just expects other people to carry on and do all the work and stay up and meet the deadline. Right. At the end of this, got it submitted, hit the deadline, did all the things, did the full design, the renderings, like everything, right? The complete package. It was chef's kiss. And the idea of that this went in and got done on time, and how many hours were spent, like, who knows, man? It was a lot. It was like just constant for probably, a week or a few days. It was totally the kind of project where you get brought in to like clean up somebody else's total disaster because it just wasn't working. And guess what? You get to do all the work, and you get to do all of it by yourself, and you get to do it by this deadline. Is that, the question is never even asked if that is like doable, right? It's just assumed this will be done. At the end of that whole process, I got a $15 Starbucks gift card.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You were appreciated.
I got the appreciation card
with a 1.5 venti latte.
Yeah. And so what message did that send to me? I mean, this is the same freaking story that we hear from. This is the same type of response to incredible work. I don't even know that the work's incredible, but just like the sheer amount of it and what you see happening in schools. And then it's like, yep, this is the way, right? You need to prioritize this over everything else. Those words weren't said like they are in some schools, right? Like that SciArc Base Camp lecture, which was super explicit. This is the way and you'll like it. But it was very much like, just to talk about what the leader's potential was in that situation to do in response to the effort was quite different than what actually happened. And so that's why it makes me think of this story is like somebody could have said, hey, like, let me take you out to lunch. Let me take you to dinner. Let me just buy you a drink and like, let's talk. Would have been so different and so much more satisfying and so much more rewarding from my point of view than like go buy a coffee. Like,
because what should have happened, we'll use our little glasses of hindsight here, is sitting down with you and talking about, okay, hey, look, Evan, I'm really glad that you were able to step in and kind of like take this over the finish line. And, I appreciate all of the long hours and stuff. Now, the question that we really need to ask is, how do we avoid that happening again? That is never a question that is asked. And that is the problem. And so I had this conversation, with somebody not too long ago about, and it all ties back into, and I actually tied it into, a conversation that you and I had about the inability of architects to say no. When you wrap it into that kind of like conversation about saying no, it's, hey, can you come in and work all night long to do this project? You should have said no.
Right.
Hey, look.
And sometimes you're in a position in a firm where you just feel like you're not allowed to say no. You can't say no. And we've been trained and conditioned to do this from school.
Absolutely. Trained and conditioned is perfect way to say that, the way things work. And so, you and I've talked about this. We've had so many conversations about so many different people who gripe about, it's like, man, can you believe like the new blood in architecture? They come in at 8:00 and they leave at 5:00 and you just can't get them to work any longer. And it's just like, because they know how to say no. And it's just like, and the problem is that people look at them and they say, ugh, I can't believe that they're not putting in that extra effort to, like work really hard and all of that other stuff. It's like, to what end? To what, what did they get out of this? What it is that you, insert name here, didn't appropriately review the schedule and the staffing requirements and everything else to get this project done in a timely manner that doesn't require you to work overtime.
That allows the business to be successful. Like all of those things are part of a successful business. And what
Right.
It shows me is that like there's zero value of what the workforce does in that situation. And if somebody doesn't know the value of their workforce, they do not know business. Like they should not be in business. Though that office, that team, it should not deserve to exist.
But the problem is that is the profession
In a nutshell.
in almost every circumstance. Are there, some people out there that don't do that? Possibly.
It remains to be seen. Haven't had that experience myself.
Haven't met those people yet. Haven't experienced that yet. I literally remember the very first day of my post-graduation working life. I was in the office at 8 a.m. and I did not leave that office till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
And then it was just mentioned somewhere like it's not normally like this, right?
No, yeah, it was always this. Yeah, we don't normally work this, this late and stuff.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, I mean, day one, you show me the difference.
So yeah, that's like it. That's come up on the show before. A friend of mine said that once, and we laughed about it in the future after that because it turned out it was like that quite often, even though nobody wants to admit it, and obviously we're never hopeful that it is like that, but it does happen. And it just, it's funny because it's true, right? Like that question that you said that doesn't get asked, which is, how are we going to make sure this never happens again? Doesn't happen.
But then, so like going back to the, advancing the profession and, the martyring. I mean, to me, we all kind of like play a part in martyring ourselves, them for like the overall kind of like whole of the profession, us, because we don't want to rock the boat and all of this other stuff. So we just kind of like take it. And where are those people that, and I'll tell you where those people are, because I've met those people and thankfully I work with those people, and they actually kind of somewhat hold us accountable, leadership kind of accountable for not like doing this forced martyrdom. Martyrdom?
Yep.
I don't.
You did it. Good job.
After a long day, I could pronounce a word. But it's just that, when people are asking, hey, why aren't they working so late? Why aren't they sacrificing? Why aren't they giving more to the profession? They are the ones who are holding us accountable. They are the ones who are saying no. We're seeing it as some lack of dedication or things like that, when I've literally, like, in probably like the past year or so, have changed my view and opinion, where it's just like, I used to think that way. I used to think, wow, like in my day,
Mm.
in my day,
Yeah.
I used to, like just give it my all. And if I had to work till like, 2:30, 3:00 in the morning, then I was going to work till 2:30, 3:00 in the morning. And then, you see these other people and you're like, why aren't they giving, that 2 to 3 a.m., kind of like, give it a go kind of thing. Because they realize that that is a stupid way to do it. And as a professional, you shouldn't be doing that. As a professional organization, you should be saying, no, like, okay, you want us to get done in 20 weeks. We can't do that in 20 weeks. You're like, oh, well, you can't, if you can't do it, then, somebody else can't.
That might be absolutely true.
Then go ahead and get them.
Make that happen. Yeah.
But if everyone in the profession was honest in that way, then everybody would say, no, we can't get this done in 20 weeks. And then it basically goes back to this. But we even undercut our own dang selves. Just like, well, I can do it for, I remember this one project where we went for an interview. We were ranked higher than anybody else. And it came down to, they started looking at like hours in the second place people's fees. And that second place person beat us out by $500. Didn't even give us the opportunity to negotiate fees. And they gave it to them because they were lower. And they do it lower in time, lower in budget, lower in fees, lower
Somebody
in this.
will do it for less. That's true.
Somebody will do it for less. And then what will happen to those people and their staff and their time? And so it's a perpetual trend.
I think it's interesting because just this conundrum, this paradox, right? Which is that so many firms say their most important asset is their people. But what does that really mean? Does that mean like as idea machines? Does that mean as like people who generate positive culture? Because what I don't think it means is that their health is important when I see behavior like this being asked for from people, right? And so how can somebody be their most important asset if you don't care how healthy they are, mentally or otherwise?
Well, it's because if your people are the most important thing, which is probably 9/10 of everybody's mission statement is, or at least to their employees is, you're the most important aspect of our firm, then they would be the ones saying no to, like, say, the 20-week like turnaround of a project, unrealistic deadlines and things like that. Because then what they're saying when they say yes is really what the most important thing is that project, is that the fees we're going to get from that project, and that we are going to be expecting our people to basically turn it around in that unrealistic deadline. So they're basically telling them immediately once they've taken the project that no, you're not. Yeah, we say you're important, but not really. Because you know what? If you quit, we can get somebody else coming in, which kind of also is that other follow up that we were, that you kind of mentioned a couple of times, which is, the outcome of like the SciArc base camp debacle.
Yeah, I do think that these are related.
Oh,
right?
very much so.
And the idea of a little bit of justice being served, it's hard to know. Again, I guess we'll put a link to previous episodes regarding this topic in the show notes, but a little bit of justice has been served, but you don't know how deep these things actually go. And I think one thing that we were kind of crusading for in those episodes was for, if there's a time to speak up about toxic workplace, education, behavior, whatever, like this is the time, right? Like this is the time to, it's like what COVID did to restaurants. It exposed all the problems with restaurants and running those businesses and how difficult it actually is, right? And just as one example, it's very similar with these kind of events that happen. It's like it's a crack and it's exposing something that's going on, and it's not just happening where that exact thing was exposed. It is kind of pervasive. It's kind of all over the place. Who's going to speak up about it? Who's going to feel like they have nothing to lose and they are going to actually do that? We're seeing it happen, and I don't want to necessarily say that the way that these types of things are handled are always cut and dry and super clean one side or the other, because I don't think they are, right? I have a counterpoint to this method of canceling, right? But that's what happened with the SciArc one, right? It was after the Basecamp live stream with Euler and Trotter and Margaret Griffin, that the letter was, or I guess it was a petition or a letter, was signed by many students over unfair practices regarding internships and even scholarships, right?
Or ask them to work long days on studio projects for the firm rather than doing traditional architectural assignments, education assignments.
Right. So, yeah.
Which basically means that you're going to do work for my firm, but you'll pay me for it because you're a student paying tuition, and that tuition is paying my salary. It was, that's the one that kills me the most.
So Wiscombe and Trotter have resigned, and I think again, like a little bit of justice has been served here, and some policies got updated and changed, but there's still a lot of, it's really opaque still about the actual report that was done by the third party that was overseen by the board of trustees. And I mean, that report has not been released. Nobody knows what else was in there. And I mean, it goes way deeper than that, right? It goes into accreditation and AAB, and they're basically enabling schools to kind of operate in these ways. And it's not specific personal behavior by certain professors or tenured faculty, but it is kind of, cultural and culturally enabled by that. And then it goes into the workforce beyond that, right? So these are all like huge problems that we see, again, just like little cracks in it and certain things happening. But I think they're way more systemic than that throughout the profession. And it does kind of relate to what Marianne brought up in her thread, which was like, so what do? You go somewhere else. That's what you do. Like, because it's hard to find. And I will raise my hand immediately and say, like, the firm that I worked for was way above board on all this stuff. And I'm not speaking from my own personal experience, but from observing others' experiences in this, to say, man, like, I feel super fortunate that I didn't fall into that. I know what the culture of the education system was like, and I know what it glorified, and I don't agree that it should have, but I got out of that. as soon as I graduated and went to work for the firms that I did, I didn't experience that myself, but we know it exists because we've seen it. We're seeing people live stream about it. Right?
True.
It's crazy.
Well, okay. So just one point that I wanted to make about this this follow-up article that was written about the SciArc debacle was if basically all of these students are kind of like rising up against these people and the practices and everything else, these are people who had a direct impact on who did and didn't get either TA positions, or didn't get scholarship opportunities, or didn't get certain advancements that they would have otherwise earned if they didn't work for or do the kind of like job that they did for these particular professors for their particular firm. The thing that kills me about all of this is if when SciArc came out and they said that this doesn't align with our values at SciArc, that don't want to read off the article, why say, well, they resigned and we accepted their resignation? I hate to say this and put it in this particular thing. These people need to be made an example of. They need to be fired, and fired publicly so that everybody else can see that, honestly, the problem that we have in this profession that reaches all the way back to architecture school should not and cannot continue. And if it's using old Tom and America as and if I pronounced her name wrong, I apologize, but to be fired, they should have been, plain and simply. And I think it's crap that people are just like, well, because in a way it's sort of lip service to the problem. It's not like, oh, we've written letters to address a couple of things. We're going to create career service advisor. You should have already had one. Sorry, man, because my school had one. I'm pretty sure your school had one. Almost every architecture school that I know of has those those opportunities there for them. There is a lot of transparency in all of these schools and stuff. And so, when they also say, to the extent that we or the industry, air quotes, went astray, no, you were astray. You were very much as much complicit in this problem as those two professors were.
By allowing it, yeah.
By allowing it, because you knew what was happening. Yeah. You absolutely knew it was happening.
And if they didn't, they're not leaders, right? Like this
exactly. That goes back to what exactly.
If you don't know what's going on in your own midst, like you're an ineffective leader. Period.
Ineffective leader, or you didn't want to know what was going on.
Ignorant, yeah.
Exactly.
Ignorance versus ignorance, right? Like there's bring that up quite often lately. Like there's one that's kind of unintentional and one that's intentional, right? And the intentional ignorance of these issues, and it makes you complicit, right? And it is interesting to me to see that they actually have to put policies like this into place that are total common sense.
Exactly. Right? No brainers whatsoever.
We couldn't do that before because it wasn't a policy, is what they're telling me now, right? But now that it's a policy, we'll be serious about it. It doesn't, and I wonder how much of this kind of goes back to California law. I don't, like I had a guest on a recent Troxel podcast, and he is CEO of a company that is, him, Platt, over at Branch Technology, and they talk about their company's core values, and they talk about, I'm like, how do you ensure that those are carried out throughout your staff and the culture that, and he goes, we hire and fire by these values, straight up. And is that the difference between operating in Tennessee versus California? Maybe it is. Like, I know it's wicked hard to fire somebody in California without like this huge breadcrumb trail of performance issues, performance improvement plans, documented this and that and the other. And even when they are quote unquote fired, they're asked to resign so that it doesn't come across a certain way for future employment or whatever. And there's so much like dancing around what's actually going on. It is total crazy making, right? It's like if you're an enabler of toxic behavior in a workplace or in an educational place or any of those, like why can't it's so crazy to me that you just can't be fired anymore. What is going on here?
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you. I worked for two professors when I was in school. One, I worked with a professor who was writing a book, and he needed someone to both update some graphics that were in his books to kind of reflect the new data, as well as create new drawings and graphics for it. And I was paid insanely more generous than I should have been.
You're like, my skills do not match the pay.
Well, I mean, I was just like, are you sure that is it? I asked him on numerous occasions, are you sure? And it wasn't that I was doubting. I mean, it's decently good. And if you look at the work that I did, it was interesting is because I would draw in the style of some of the people that he had used in the previous edition to make sure that there was some visual continuity and all this other stuff. And so, I mean, it challenged me, and I did a really damn good job of doing it. But but he paid me and treated me well, and it wasn't like special favors or anything like that. It was just it was a job, and I was treated like it was a good job. And then I worked for another professor who was a traditional architect and a structural engineer. And I worked for him, and I got, paid market rate for it, not anything else. Hey, you can learn credit and stuff. But what I did learn is because then, since he was a structural engineer as well, I actually learned how to think as both a structural engineer and an architect, which still serves me today, the education that I got. But I also got paid for it, and I got paid well for it.
That's crazy talk.
The thing that I just feel so bad for these students about is that they were preyed upon.
Well, they're preyed upon. And you know what the new policy is? They can't get paid less than minimum wage.
Yeah. I mean, just
so they could go work at McDonald's, or they could go work for, as an intern in architecture and that makes no sense to me.
Right. Exactly. and the thing that kills me about that policy is the people who are employing them have a billable rate for them that they're passing on to the client, right? And so they're getting paid really well for the labor that they are not paying for, or paying very little for. And I mean, I remember ages ago, multiple, Twitter rants about unpaid internships and things like that, how they need to go away. And this is, this particular issue is a perfect example of that. It's just all of these people that, they're training you how to be a part of this, but they're also billing their clients for all of the work that you're doing. So they're getting paid for you. So they should be paying you.
And if they're not, again, if it all comes back to not understanding the value that somebody's providing, you don't deserve to be in business.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
But these students, and they're in a tough spot because they felt like they had to do the work so that they could get considered for a scholarship, and all of these other sacrifices. It's just a terrible position to put people in, totally predatory. And those, don't deserve to exist. Those businesses don't deserve to exist. Their positions don't deserve to exist.
But this kind of also ties back into the earlier conversation about the systemic problems in architecture, because it really is an expectation that you're going to do this because this is just what's been done. And so it's the changing of that toxic environment, that predatory environment, of both just the actual profession when you're there, or, when you're trying to get there, that needs to go away faster. And if it's going to take all of these employees that, I don't even want to call them, like project architects, recent graduates and stuff like that, if it's going to take them to constantly keep saying no and to call the profession out on its BS, then that's exactly what needs to happen.
And that's what we don't see happening. Right? That was the call to action after the SciArc base camp, where we did a follow-up episode, and it was like, look, man, this is your chance, and I don't see it happening, right? And I still don't necessarily see it happening. It is happening in small ways, in small circles. Like, it was nice to see that, okay, there was also faculty and tenured staff, tenured faculty who signed that petition about this unfair situation that was going on, because they were aware of it and they weren't afraid to sign their name on it too, right? But that is like the exception. Like the big stuff that's going on out there is still very much not being addressed. And I don't know if that is strictly out of fear. I'm sure on many levels it is based on fear, right? Because people don't like change. They don't want to go out and find another place that's probably the same and all of these things. And the enemy you know is better than the enemy that you don't. And all of these things. And it is kind of programmed in, like you're saying. It's totally programmed in, and it becomes this expectation. And then it's like the boiling of the frog, and then you don't realize it. All of a sudden it's like, well, how did we get here? We don't even know how we got here, but now this is how we do it, because this is the way we've always done it. And the cycle continues. And it does take a lot of bravery. And that's what I am rooting for with people, to be brave, to make this profession better for the future, because if they don't, seriously, no one else is going to do it, because they're not doing it. And then again, I have to ask, does the profession deserve to exist? If it seriously is going to continue to eat its young because they just keep lining up at the door, because these universities keep pumping them out in this capacity, then to me, it doesn't deserve to exist. And there are plenty of people out there who are willing to take this on, right? And be the replacement of the architectural profession, whether that's through technology, development, real estate, prefabrication, construction. Like, there are so many other people who are willing to take the very smallest piece of the pie away, which is the architects in the building industry. Like, literally, we're the smallest piece of the pie, right? As far as fees go, percentage wise, there are so many other people who will be like, yeah, we'll just like absorb that into ours. Cool. We don't have to deal with them anymore. Like they are working on doing that, right? So this whole ignorance of the actual issues that are going on at the systemic level of labor in our offices, to the business models, to the mighty education system, that is totally full of itself in many places, it's like all of these things have to be addressed.
Well, let's go back to Marianne and maybe close out with, that's exactly what she's doing. She saw that the environment that she was growing her professional life in wasn't willing to change, that she went outside of the profession to make a difference for the profession.
Profession adjacent. Yep.
Profession adjacent, but it was still that if the profession itself isn't willing to change, there are other people who will help us change it for you and just leave you behind. So it goes back to if we're not willing to change, we don't deserve to exist. I mean, basically just find out, sorry, I had something in my head and it just kind of like blanked out, but I mean, it was basically just, keep pushing, and you're going to find out that there are more people who are willing to do what you're unwilling to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A quote that I like about change is, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less.
Exactly.
Eric Shinseki. That's a fantastic quote, right? It's just like, it's totally true. There's two things that architects hate: the way things are and change, right? And if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. See all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what we're doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and don't forget to share it with your friends. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at archispeakpodcast.com, where you can find our entire catalog of shows. Talk to you soon.